History books paint the British Empire as a story of power, conquest, and progress. But behind the grand tales of kings and colonies, there are chapters filled with eerie mysteries. Vanishing ships, secret societies, and unexplained events that no historian has ever fully solved. Today, we uncover the forgotten secrets of the British Empire that have puzzled experts for centuries, clues that may change how you see history forever. Welcome back, history explorers. If you think you know the British Empire, think again. Beneath the grandeur of one of history's most powerful empires lies a web of strange legends, unsolved events, and baffling mysteries. From ghostly fortresses to secret treasures that disappeared without a trace, we're diving deep into the mysteries that historians still argue about today. So, grab your explorer's hat, because what you're about to hear might just keep you awake tonight. The British Empire's power in the 17th and 18th centuries was built on wealth. But not just any wealth, the kind that came in chests of gold, silver, precious gems, and rare artifacts shipped across dangerous oceans. At the center of this empire stood the East India Company, a private trading company so powerful it controlled armies, overthrew rulers, and practically ran India for decades. Its ships sailed the world, carrying spices, silk, tea, and unimaginable fortunes. But what many don't know is that some of those shipments vanished into thin air, leaving behind tales that feel like the plot of a thriller rather than the pages of history. Imagine a massive wooden ship loaded with chests of gold coins, diamonds from Indian mines, and rare artifacts destined for London. The cargo alone would be worth hundreds of millions today. The crew sets sail, the route is secure, yet somewhere along the way the ship never arrives. Sometimes a wreck would wash up months later, empty, with no trace of the treasure. Other times, the ship simply disappeared entirely, as if the ocean had swallowed it whole. No pirates caught, no mutiny confirmed. Just silence. And with every disappearance, rumors grew wilder. Some historians blame storms and shipwrecks, but there's a twist: many of these vanishings happened in calm seas, on well-traveled routes, aboard ships crewed by veterans of maritime trade. The East India Company had strict security. They used coded messages for shipments. Many vessels traveled in convoys to avoid pirates. Yet despite all these precautions, records show multiple treasure shipments never reached their destination. One famous example was a ship rumored to be carrying Mughal Empire gold in the early 1700s. It left India under heavy guard, was last sighted near the Cape of Good Hope, and then nothing, no wreckage. No survivors. Just a blank space in history where millions in treasure should have been. Naturally, whispers of conspiracy began circulating in London taverns and Indian ports alike. Was it inside theft merchants and company officials collaborating with pirates? After all, corruption was rampant in the East India Company, with fortunes made and lost overnight. Some letters discovered decades later hinted at secret agreements between rogue captains and notorious pirate crews in the Indian Ocean. Others suspected rival European powers like France or Spain intercepting shipments to weaken Britain's growing empire. But again, no concrete proof ever surfaced. Then there are the legend stories told by sailors of ghost ships and cursed treasures. One tale speaks of a vessel called the Star of Bengal, allegedly carrying cursed Mughal jewels taken from a desecrated temple. The ship reportedly vanished in mysterious fog, and sailors claimed that every attempt to recover the wreck ended in disaster storms, illnesses, even deaths among divers. The company quietly erased all mention of this voyage from official logs, fueling speculation that they feared something supernatural attached to the missing treasure. Even stranger, in the British Library today, researchers have found coded company ledgers from the 18th century referencing something called Project Nightfall, believed to be a covert operation dealing with missing shipments. The ledgers stop abruptly mid-century, suggesting either the project ended or was buried deliberately. What secrets did those missing pages hold? Fast forward to modern times. Treasure hunters and marine archaeologists have scoured shipwrecks along Indian Ocean trade routes, the African coastline, and the Caribbean. While some East India Company coins and cannons have been recovered, the legendary lost cargoes remain unfound. No one knows if they were looted and melted down centuries ago, Or if chests of gold still sit untouched on the ocean floor, guarded by time and tide? The mystery deepens because the East India Company itself dissolved in the 1800s, and with it, many records vanished. Fires, wars, and deliberate destruction erased countless documents about its operations. Some conspiracy theorists believe Britain's own government hid details about the missing treasures to protect reputations and prevent panic among investors who poured fortunes into the company's trade ventures. After all, the empire's image depended on power and control, not on admitting that entire shipments of royal treasure simply disappeared under its watch. And so we're left with fragments, old maps with handwritten notes, letters between merchants speaking in riddles about lost gold, sailors' diaries describing strange lights at sea before ships vanished. Were these disappearances the work of storms, pirates, human greed, or something far stranger, lurking beyond history's edge? It was the late 1500s, a time when the British Empire was still finding its place among the great powers of the world. Queen Elizabeth I had her eyes set on the New World, determined to plant the English flag across the vast unknown territories of the Americas. Among those early attempts was the Roanoke Colony, often called the Lost Colony, a settlement established on Roanoke Island off the coast of present-day North Carolina. At first glance, it seems like a story purely about the American frontier. But hidden deep within British archives and scattered across coded letters of the era lies the suggestion of something far more complex, a connection between Roanoke's disappearance and secret dealings within the British Empire itself. Here's what we know. In 1587, a group of about 115 English settlers landed on Roanoke Island under the leadership of Governor John White. They built homes, planted crops, and tried to forge a life in this new world. A few months later, White returned to England for supplies, expecting to come back quickly. But war with Spain delayed his journey. When he finally returned in 1590, he found the settlement completely abandoned. No people, no bodies, no signs of struggle. The only clue carved into a tree was a single, mysterious word, Croatoan. For centuries, historians assumed the settlers integrated with local native tribes or were killed. But recent discoveries suggest something stranger. Some letters written by English explorers decades later reference a hidden community of settlers living far inland, protected by unknown laws. Others hint at secret missions funded by Elizabethan spymaster Sir Francis Walsingham, suggesting that Roanoke might have been more than just a colony. It might have been part of a covert intelligence network designed to challenge Spain's dominance in the New World. Here's where the British Empire connection deepens. In the 1600s, as the empire expanded, cryptic references to Roanoke kept appearing in military and trade documents. A few reports from early Virginia settlers spoke of English-speaking natives wearing fragments of European clothing. One settler even claimed to have seen a man with gray eyes, rare among the local population, who claimed his grandfather came from a place called Roanoke. Could survivors have been living in secret, their existence known only to certain officials within the empire? Then there are the symbols. Archaeologists have found carved stones, known as the Dare Stones, allegedly written by Roanoke survivors, detailing years of struggle and eventual rescue by unknown benefactors. Some historians dismiss them as fakes, but others believe at least a few might be genuine, pointing toward secret relocation efforts possibly organized by English agents or rival colonial powers. The theory goes like this: the British Crown, engaged in a shadow war with Spain, couldn't afford public failure. If Roanoke had collapsed due to starvation or conflict, it would have embarrassed England on the world stage. But if survivors were quietly rescued or absorbed into secret settlements, the Crown could maintain control of the narrative while keeping Spanish spies guessing. Some even speculate that survivors were moved to hidden outposts connected to early trade routes, which later became part of Britain's vast colonial network. Supporting this idea are fragments of coded letters from the early 1600s discovered in the British Museum. These letters, written by merchants with ties to the Crown, mention the Roanoke matter and speak of relocation under secrecy of night and the company's interest in silence. The company in question could only have been the Virginia Company, which later evolved into one of the British Empire's most powerful colonial enterprises. If true, this means Roanoke's settlers might not have vanished at all, they might have been deliberately hidden to serve Britain's larger imperial ambitions. And yet, no definitive evidence has ever surfaced. Modern DNA studies among native tribes in the region have found occasional European markers dating back centuries, but nothing conclusive enough to prove a direct link. Historians remain divided, some seeing only coincidence. Others convinced there was a cover-up stretching from Elizabethan England into the early British Empire. Even more puzzling are the rumors that some Roanoke artifacts items bearing Elizabethan design were quietly removed from museum collections in the 19th century by British officials. Why erase traces of a failed colony unless there was something about its fate the empire didn't want the world to know? Some researchers believe the answer lies in classified documents still locked away in private archives belonging to descendants of East India Company officials and early colonial administrators' families, who had reasons to protect imperial secrets long after the empire itself began to fade. It was December 1872 when a British ship named the Dei Gratia spotted another vessel drifting silently in the Atlantic Ocean, halfway between the Azores and Portugal. At first glance, it seemed perfectly fine, its sails partly set, the hull steady, no sign of distress. But as the Dei Gratia drew closer, something became clear. There was no one on deck. No signals, no shouts, no crew coming out to greet them. The drifting ship bore a name on its stern, Mary Celeste. When the boarding party from the Dei Gratia climbed aboard, they found a scene that would go down in history as one of the greatest maritime mysteries of the British Empire and the world. The ship was seaworthy. There was no damage to the hull. Cargo was intact. Food supplies were plentiful. The crew's personal belongings were undisturbed. Even the ship's logbook was neatly stored, its final entry calm and uneventful, written just 10 days earlier. Yet every single person on board, captain, his wife, their young daughter, and the crew had vanished without a trace. To this day, the fate of the Mary Celeste remains one of history's unsolved enigmas. The British and American authorities launched investigations, suspecting piracy at first. But there were no signs of struggle, no looting, nothing stolen except the ship's single lifeboat, which was missing. If pirates had attacked, why leave the valuable cargo of industrial alcohol untouched? Why abandon a perfectly good ship in the middle of the ocean? Some speculated mutiny. Perhaps the crew murdered the captain and his family, then fled in the lifeboat. But again, why would they leave behind all the supplies and the ship itself, the very thing that could have taken them to safety? It didn't add up. Then came the wilder theories. Some claimed seaquakes or waterspouts had struck, terrifying the crew into abandoning ship prematurely. Others whispered about paranormal forces, speaking of ghostly lights seen in the Atlantic around that time. There was even talk of the Bermuda Triangle, though the ship was far from its boundaries. What makes the Mary Celeste story even stranger is the background of those involved. Captain Benjamin Briggs was an experienced sailor, a devout Christian respected by his peers. He had invested his life savings into this ship, bringing along his wife Sarah and their 2-year-old daughter Sophia for what was supposed to be a routine voyage from New York to Genoa, Italy. This was no reckless man likely to abandon ship without cause. And yet, something drove everyone to leave a perfectly functional vessel for a small lifeboat in the middle of the Atlantic. No lifeboat was ever found, no survivors ever reported. It was as if the ocean itself swallowed them whole. The British maritime courts held hearings in Gibraltar, struggling to find answers. Some accused the Dei Gratia crew of foul play, suggesting they killed the Mary Celeste crew to claim salvage rights. But evidence never supported this, and the Dei Gratia sailors swore they found the ship exactly as they reported, abandoned but intact. One detail from the ship's log has fueled centuries of speculation. The final entry, dated November 25th, mentioned the vessel's position near the Azores but described nothing unusual. Weather records later showed rough seas in the region, but nothing severe enough to explain such panic. Some theorists believe leaking alcohol fumes from the cargo may have caused an explosion scare. Imagine the smell of fumes filling the ship's hold, the fear of a fire breaking out at sea. The crew, thinking the ship was about to blow, might have lowered the lifeboat temporarily, tying it to the Mary Celeste with a rope only for the rope to snap, leaving them stranded as the larger vessel drifted away. It's a plausible theory, but one without proof. What deepens the mystery is how the story captured Victorian Britain's imagination. Newspapers published sensational accounts, turning the Mary Celeste into a legend of the sea. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, years before creating Sherlock Holmes, even wrote a fictionalized account suggesting sea monsters and supernatural forces, which only added to the ship's haunted reputation. In the decades that followed, the Mary Celeste herself continued sailing under new owners, but met a grim fate when one tried to deliberately wreck her for insurance fraud in 1885. The plan failed. The ship sank off Haiti, and with it perhaps any remaining clues about her ghostly voyage. Yet in British maritime records, the official verdict remained frustratingly vague. The crew of the Mary Celeste had simply disappeared, cause unknown. No wreckage of the lifeboat, no bones on distant shores, no message in a bottle explaining what happened. When people think of the British Empire, they imagine red-coated soldiers, massive ships, royal decrees, and the Union Jack flying over distant lands. But beneath the surface of this global empire ran currents of secrecy, networks of whispers, symbols carved into stone, and coded letters passed between men who operated in shadows. Historians have long debated just how deep this world of secret societies and hidden codes went, but fragments of evidence suggest the empire's expansion was not only about armies and trade, it was also about secret knowledge guarded by powerful men with mysterious agendas. The Freemasons are the first name that comes to mind when discussing secret groups tied to the British Empire. Their lodges stretched from London to Calcutta, from the Caribbean to Africa. On paper, the Freemasons claimed to be about fraternity, charity, and moral philosophy. But critics have always accused them of shaping politics behind closed doors, influencing colonial governors, military officers, even members of parliament. Some of Britain's most powerful figures, prime ministers, generals, admirals, were known Masons. And in the archives of old colonial offices, letters sealed with Masonic symbols have been found discussing not just trade, but uprisings, treaties, and wars. One curious example comes from India during the 18th century. British officers stationed there wrote in journals about strange meetings held at night in Calcutta, where Masonic symbols were combined with local mystical traditions. One diary entry preserved in the British Library even described a ritual concerning empire matters, attended by men who later became key figures in the East India Company. What was discussed in those candlelit rooms? Were decisions that shaped history being made not in Parliament, but in secret lodges blending European and Eastern mysticism? And it wasn't just the Freemasons. There were rumors of smaller, more secretive groups, societies with names like the Order of the Quest and the Seven Circles said to include explorers, scholars, and spies. These men allegedly traded in hidden knowledge, maps of uncharted territories, ancient manuscripts taken from temples and tombs, even coded prophecies. Some historians dismiss these tales as conspiracy theories, yet strange coincidences keep turning up. For example, several British explorers in Africa and the Middle East reported finding locals already aware of their arrival, as if warned ahead of time by mysterious networks operating beyond official colonial channels. Then there are the codes. British intelligence during the Empire's height was notorious for using ciphers, but a few discovered in private collections remain unsolved to this day. 1. Known as the Bombay Cipher, consists of pages filled with strange symbols found in the trunk of a deceased East India Company officer in 1812. Cryptographers have tried for decades to break it, but no one has succeeded. Some believe it hides details about secret negotiations with Indian princes. Others think it might reveal the location of treasure smuggled out during the empire's expansion. In London, too, secret symbols appeared in unexpected places. Certain public buildings financed by colonial wealth bore carvings that scholars now believe were Masonic or esoteric in nature: compasses, all-seeing eyes, suns, and pyramid symbols suggesting that empire builders saw themselves as part of some grand hidden design. Even Westminster Abbey, the heart of British power and religion, contains tombs and plaques decorated with markings that some claim link back to secret societies guiding imperial destiny from the shadows. The secrecy extended into exploration as well. British expeditions into Africa, Asia, and the Arctic often carried coded journals. One famous explorer, Sir Richard Francis Burton, wrote entire passages of his reports in languages only a handful of people could read, hiding discoveries about lost cities and ancient ruins. Why the secrecy? Was it simply to protect information from rival powers like France and Spain, or were there deeper motives, knowledge considered too dangerous for the public? Perhaps the most tantalizing mystery comes from a letter discovered in 1908, among the papers of a retired colonial administrator. Written in the early 1800s, it speaks cryptically of a brotherhood of the empire, claiming its members were keepers of both the crown's interests and older, stranger truths. The letter mentions hidden archives beneath London containing documents from before the empire, before even the kingdom, implying that secret societies within the empire saw themselves as heirs to something far older than Britain itself. To this day, historians argue over whether these societies truly controlled events or simply existed on the fringes of empire. But the symbols carved into stone buildings, the coded letters left unsolved, and the diaries hinting at midnight meetings all suggest that the story of the British Empire was not only written in Parliament and battlefields, but also in the secret codes of men who preferred to remain unseen. So when we pull back and look at the British Empire not just as a political power or economic giant, but as a living story filled with unanswered questions, a different picture emerges. The vanished treasures of the East India Company, the mysterious fate of the Roanoke settlers, the eerie silence of the Mary Celeste drifting across the Atlantic, and the shadowy networks of secret societies whispering behind the scenes. All of it reminds us that history is never as straightforward as textbooks want us to believe. For every treaty signed and every battle won, there are legends, secrets, and riddles that refuse to be explained. Maybe some truths were lost to time, buried in archives, destroyed by fire or war. Maybe some were hidden deliberately by those who feared what might happen if the world knew too much. Or maybe, just maybe, some mysteries were never meant to be solved at all. And that's the strange beauty of history. The British Empire may have left behind railways, cities, and libraries across continents, but it also left behind ghost stories and coded puzzles, treasure maps without X marks, and questions that echo through the centuries. Questions that historians, archaeologists, and adventurers are still chasing today. Because as long as there are unsolved mysteries, the story of the British Empire and perhaps history itself will never truly be finished.